In 1843, the sixth generation of the Williams lineage came to a sudden and violent halt. At 41 years old, Daniel Williams took his own life. He left behind a 5-year-old boy named Daniel David Williams. Because of his father's early death, the boy never carried the title of junior, marking a clean break from the naming traditions of the men who came before him. This 1850 commissioner's sale notice reveals the tragedy's material consequence. The family's 100-acre Metedeconk River farm was partitioned and sold. The document details what the young boy was stripped of: a mature apple orchard and the nearly new dwelling house his father recently finished. Young Daniel's actual inheritance was a profound vacuum. Without a home or land to claim, he and his siblings were forced to move into the household of his mother's new husband, Gilbert Layton. By the mid-19th century, Monmouth County was moving past its frontier roots. The region was organizing into structured agricultural townships that required intense communal labor to thrive. Daniel came of age in this changing landscape, finding his footing while the very first shots of the American Civil War began to violently echo across the divided country. On September 7, 1862, just as his local regiment was being organized for the front, Daniel married Catherine Louisa Newman. Their ceremony was performed by Reverend J.L. Souter at the Methodist Episcopal Parsonage in Farmingdale. The Methodist Episcopal Church is a Protestant denomination characterized by formal liturgy and ordained clergy, signaling that Daniel had walked away from the silent, unprogrammed worship of his Quaker ancestors. By establishing this new marriage and a distinct spiritual foundation, Daniel created a stabilizing anchor for his family just before a massive wave of tragedy struck his generation. The 1860s were a period of extreme mortality for rural New Jersey. Families lived in the shadow of disease and war, with few medical tools to combat the infections ravaging the countryside. Shortly after his wedding, Daniel faced a staggering series of deaths. Between 1863 and 1867, he buried his brother Thomas and 5 of his sisters, Mary, Rebecca, Catherine, Anne, and Lucinda. This sudden loss of nearly his entire sibling group left Daniel isolated. He was forced to carry the weight of the Williams name almost entirely alone. Faced with such emotional devastation, Daniel focused his energy on the one thing he could measure: the land. He spent the next decades as a yeoman farmer in Howell. A yeoman is a farmer who owns and works his own land, and Daniel used his position to buy inland tracts from his neighbors, rebuilding a family portfolio. This map illustrates his foresight. Daniel diversified his holdings into coastal real estate, trading lots in West Bradley Beach to build a financial fortress that went beyond simple farming. By leveraging these properties, he turned his personal losses into geographic security, ensuring his family would never be unmoored again. Daniel and Catherine's own family eventually grew to include 8 children, a new generation that seemed destined to carry the legacy forward. But even with his financial success, Daniel could not escape the era's high mortality rate. He would ultimately outlive 6 of his own 8 children. The late 1890s were particularly brutal. In 1897, his 22-year-old son, Daniel Arthur, died of consumption. Consumption was the 19th century term for tuberculosis, a wasting disease of the lungs. Only a year later, tragedy struck again. His 32-year-old son, Silas Newman, died from a pistol wound to the heart, leaving Daniel and Catherine to endure yet another period of deep mourning. His wealth and land could not purchase immunity from grief. Daniel was forced to bury his children one after another. By 1900, Daniel reached a decisive turning point. Despite the weight of his losses, he chose to make a deliberate retreat to his origins. He and his brother William moved back to the original 1788 ancestral Williams homestead on Kent Road, reclaiming the exact soil their great-grandfather had settled. He spent his twilight years in a quiet routine, tending his garden and walking more than a mile every Sunday to attend services at the Bethel Methodist Episcopal Church. After a lifetime of acquiring new territory and burying loved ones, his final act of healing was found by planting himself back in his family's original soil. We can track the final stage of his survival through his deeds. In his last years, he transferred his accumulated lands to his surviving children for just $1 each, ensuring their absolute security. The 1930 census shows the result of his endurance. Now 91 years old, Uncle Dan lived with his son Thomas, overseeing 4 living generations of the Williams lineage under one roof. Catherine passed away in 1920. Daniel outlasted her by 17 years, finally passing in 1937, at the age of 99. Daniel David Williams bridged a full century of American history and immeasurable private grief to save his family line, passing the unbroken chain to his son, Thomas Edward Williams.